Straight Hammy podcast, talking sports. Wicca, Mavericks.
Hello and welcome to the Straight Hammy podcast. Today is May 28th. My name is Mark.
I'm Rick.
And I'm Travis.
Today we've got a couple topics for you. We're going to talk about Mark Cuban's comments that he has a 2-year plan for the Mavs and the tough schedule ahead for the Rangers. Alright, so in an interview with ESPN Radio, Mark Cuban discussed the plan going into this offseason, and it turns out it's actually better thought of as a 2-year plan. I actually want to read you his comments so we can have it here in his words. He said, "We want to be a championship team. We've never said we have to be a championship team this year. If we got the top free agent, that doesn't leave us with a whole lot of flexibility to add a lot of players, but we have a good nucleus around them. We know we'll have a good team, but we won't know if we have a great team. If you look at this like a 2-year plan, then we think we're on a track to have a great team by the end of next year." And then in talking about major free agents, he had this to say, "I can make an argument why we should absolutely go after the big fish, and I can make an argument on why we shouldn't. There are a lot of really, really good players that, in combination, that I think can make us a top 3 or 4 seed in the West." So I don't know if he's trying to say the right things or if he's just saying all of the things so he comes out looking like roses. Either way, like
say all of the things.
He's just covered his bases, So
Well, his argument against signing the top players is his pocketbook. I don't know if that's any secret there.
See,
but
I
if he's trying to
disagree.
get into a championship, I mean, you got to be aggressive, and he hasn't been.
See,
2-year window was the last 2 years.
Yeah.
You missed that.
I disagree because when we talk about this, I talk all the time about how I don't necessarily want Dwight Howard or Chris Paul.
Fair.
Now, Chris Paul is Chris Paul, so you can convince me. But I talk about wanting B-plus players or A-minus players that can be A-plus players, and about the fact that there's not that big a difference between the Al Jeffersons and Dwight Howards, except for maybe what you can get them for. So I understand what he's saying, and I think we've presented that, and I think we felt that way. Like we talked about how much of a long shot Chris Paul and Dwight Howard are together.
Right.
It's silly unless they just want to do it, and then somebody wants to take Sean Marion off our hands for fun, and which that's not that big a stretch. But I think if the Mavericks start calling around about Sean Marion for nothing, everybody's going to go, "Oh, they're about to sign Dwight Howard and Chris Paul. We may not want to do this." And so, in kind of the Michael Beasley scenario that the Heat had to do before they signed their big three. But the more likely scenario is that you get one guy with the cap space that you actually have with, either burning the first-round pick on a Euro or Sean Marion restructuring. You get the one guy, and then going into next year, when Dirk takes his significant pay cut, as he calls it, you're looking at, maybe room to sign another max player. So Cuban's right. If they sign a max player, it is a 2-year plan. But is that the right plan?
Well, here's my question to you is, that seems like fair enough to say at this point in time because of the cap situation and the players they can go after and so on, but why wasn't that the case in 2011 after the championship? And you say, now we're losing these guys to their contracts, so we're going to be signing a bunch of 1-year deals.
Yeah, because they were so far over the luxury tax even at that point when they lost those 3 guys or 4 guys, Butler, J.J. Barea, Tyson Chandler, the big one obviously, and Deshaun Stevenson, which was a veteran minimum guy the next year anyway. So I honestly have no idea why he wasn't back other than you don't want crazy unless you have a chance to win a ring. They at that point they were still over the tax with Kidd, Terry. They had signed to $16 million a year. Kidd was on a big deal from New Jersey from when he was still he had re-signed here, but he still got crazy Jason Kidd money. Dirk is everybody wants to talk about the pay cut he took before that championship year, but he is the second highest paid NBA player right now behind Kobe Bryant. So it's not like he's cheap. He didn't do what we want him to do next year and take a Tim Duncan like $9 or $10 million a year contract, which he's at least hinted at the fact that maybe he's willing to do. And so that's what Cuban's saying.
So the last 2 years, we're just getting some of those
unmanageable
contracts off the books.
Last year
it's about
last year they had the room to sign a max player. Last season, the season after the championship year, they
still had Terry and Kidd.
They still had Terry and Kidd. When they came off the books, and Kidd not by Mavericks management choice, which would have been a terrible contract, by the way, going forward. So it's not like they're making every right decision. But they thought that not only were they going to have a chance to pitch Deron Williams, but they thought they were going to have a chance to pitch Chris Paul and Dwight Howard at that point. Paul got traded and opted into his additional year. Dwight Howard opted into his additional year under pressure in Orlando and then got moved. So both of those guys opted in when
the Mavs were counting on them being available.
Yes. So there should have been, when the Mavs made the decision they made, there should have been 3 quote-unquote big fish on the market, and there was one. And that one got his head turned by Joe Johnson and his old ankle somehow. And thought that Joe Johnson and Gerald Wallace and Brook Lopez equaled more than Dirk, which I guess it equals more humans than Dirk, but not really more production than. Oh, Brook Lopez had a pretty solid year this year. So they were in the same situation they're going to be in this summer, last summer, for the most part, because they signed all the one-year contracts and tried to ride out the year they wrote out. This year they're in a more advantageous situation because they're like, if Marion restructures, they're probably somewhere around 43 or something like that million. If Marion restructures, that's keeping Vince. That's before you sign Jay Crowder. I think you have an option on Jay Crowder.
I think so.
But they don't going forward after that. Jay Crowder is going to could be a problem, like Brandon Wright's a problem right now. And so if Marion restructures and they get right at a reasonable dollar amount, they're 42, 43-ish, and they have the money under the cap to go after a max player. One. And then next year, Vince comes off the books. If you don't do the Marion restructure and basically don't sign Brandon Wright, then Marion comes off the books. Dirk's salary goes down significantly, and you're looking at a whole new salary cap situation. You could be looking at 2 max players and Dirk, which gets you in a more San Antonio-like scenario where you can fit, you just fit more players. Like that's what San Antonio did. Duncan took less money and said, "I don't want to go anywhere else." Took $9 million a year essentially. Tony Parker got max money. Ginobili got good money that's kind of being wasted right now. Steven Jackson got good money, which also is kind of being wasted right now. And they paid Danny Green, and they were able to bring in rookies around that worked out. Kawhi Leonard and guys like that really, really worked out. So I think the Mavericks' plan going forward isn't dumb. The 2-year plan isn't dumb. But it does possibly, like, it leads you back to saying, okay, why did we do all this in the first place? And so I just want to get an idea of what you guys think in the 2014-15 season, which is the year that Cuban says they can be a championship level team again. Do you think 2 max players in Dirk or a max player Dirk and two high quality, $8 to $10 million players can be a championship level team.
All right, getting past the fact that the last 2 years were a bit of a disappointment record-wise, I understand the salary implications, thanks to the research that TK did. And so get past that disappointment, then yes, a 2-year time frame seems reasonable. I think it is dependent on landing one of those max player guys this year and turning that into a 50-win season.
Mm-hmm.
If you
season.
Yeah. If you do that, then next season when you can grab one guy or two A- level guys, then absolutely, I think you have a shot. And I'm okay with that. As a fan, I feel like they're heading in the right direction. They've got the right ambitions. It wasn't just cost-saving moves at the time. It was really trying to basically avoid a cap situation like the Cowboys are in, where every year they're up against it.
Yeah.
The Mavs said, look, we're up against it now, and we will be if we don't do anything about it. So let's let some of these come off the books. Let's let some of these guys go to other teams for money that we don't want to pay them. And then we'll get the cap situation solved, and then we'll go get the guys that we can long-term do and be back in the championship. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, I'm okay with it, and I think it's realistic. I think Mark Cuban is not just talking butterflies and roses to us. I mean, I think it's legit based on those scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as a Mavericks fan, knowing the organization, you look at where they're at now, they've got to win one for Dirk. They got to win another one for Dirk while he's still, elite
at least
and useful.
Compete for Dirk.
Yeah. I mean, you've got the obligation to your fans, you got the obligation to the organization, but there's also that obligation to Dirk. So, and they're not going to be able to fill that need through the draft. They've never drafted well. So, I mean, they've been trying their hardest to get to a point where they can get better through free agency. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's kind of their only option, it seems like. And so,
no, but I mean, if, like, say Cuban's plan works out and he lands the two max players or max player plus two quality players in Dirk, is that good enough in the league with Oklahoma City's and Miami's and...
I think
probably not, but I don't know.
I think it would put them in the conversation if they're able to take some of the young guys that they have acquired. And then this is a big if because, like I said, the history doesn't support it. But if Jay Crowder comes on as a significant role player.
And that looks positive, at least.
If Brandon Wright is somehow able to stay with him and continue his role.
Yeah.
If... Jared Cunningham and or another point guard drafted this year turn into a significant role player, maybe a sixth man or somehow a starting guard out of those two.
Yeah, I mean, Miami works because of Norris Cole and because of who's the kid from Kansas, Chalmers.
Yeah, so if you have those 3 or 4 stars, you got to have the role players, and that's where I think the Mavericks have struggled because they can't get them on the cheap.
Yeah,
they've had to go
really expensive role players.
Yeah, they've had to go get free agents. Terry was a free agent that we brought here. Marion and Carter have been free agents that have come here. Stevenson was a huge role player in the championship run.
Stevenson was expensive that year.
You're talking about all guys who are not. Butler was and Carter and. Marion were kind of stars, but they were like on the downhill. Not Butler, but he wasn't.
They weren't stars anymore.
You get what I'm saying. So they're expensive role players, and you can't have that. If you're going to go get the 4 guys that are not role players, the 3 guys that are not role players, those are like star players.
Yeah,
you got to have young, inexpensive role players that are effective. San Antonio does a great job with that. The Heat did a great job building around their 3. Boston did it when they had their 3.
Yeah, it seemed like every veteran was going to Boston for the minimum for a little while. Yeah. And the Heat, even in the 05 series that nobody likes to talk about, you had Gary Payton, Antoine Walker, Alonzo Mourning all playing for nothing.
Yeah.
on that team and making big plays. Gary Payton with that freaking 17-footer that I can't get out of my head, but.
And he had that ref that was working for him too. But.
Yeah, that's Bennett Salvatore. What's up? But you're absolutely right, and that is a hole in that 2-year plan. Is who are these role players? Who are your? If you're going to have Jordan, you got to have Steve Kerr. You got to have Judd Buechler.
And they've got guys on the team that can do it now. It's whether or not they can maintain those guys on the team at a reasonable price and add a couple guys to that.
And maybe take Marion
down
Carter significantly.
Come off,
in salary. So when we come back, we'll do a little bit of talk about why did we do this to start with, and what would this team look like if they didn't make the decisions? Would they be as financially inflexible as Cuban made it sound originally? I thought that I had like an allergic reaction to some weeds yesterday on my ankle. Weeds.
No.
Hey, we're back on Strain Hammy Podcast talking sports. We've got on the back of the Mark Cuban words for a 2-year plan to return to contention. We're going to contemplate: is it worth the 2-year plan, or could they have tried better to defend the title and not be in a 2-year predicament right now? So let's take a look at some of the contracts back in the title defense year and see if we could have prevented this.
Yeah, the major loss in free agency right after the title was Tyson Chandler.
Absolutely.
And we just couldn't do that because the CBA prohibited it. But if we look at the 2 years we lost after the title defense so far, and then the 2-year plan it's going to take us to get back into contention according to Mark Cuban, 2 + 2 equals
6?
4 for $55 million. And so, and that's the Tyson Chandler contract. You got a 4-year deal. And so what you're looking at essentially is, can you turn your team over in 4 years with that Tyson Chandler albatross around your neck that Cuban told us at the time? We love Tyson. He's our favorite player ever. But he doesn't really score that much. Don't tell him we said that. And it's just too much money. We're not financially flexible enough if we sign it for Tyson. Although he kind of tried to package it as Tyson, Karan, JJ, and Deshaun Stevenson. Because for some reason he was always obsessed with Deshaun Stevenson's $900,000 or whatever he made. And so with Chandler specifically, 11 and 12 have come and gone. The first 2 years of his big deal. The last two are $14 million apiece, or like $14.5. And I don't think it puts you in a significantly worse position if you re-sign that guy the year of. It gives you a chance to make a legitimate title defense because if you remember when they broke up the band, they didn't really break up the band. They lost Tyson, they lost Karan, they lost JJ as far as significant players on the team, and Stevenson. But they still had Kidd, they still had Jason Terry, they still had Dirk. Terry and Dirk being, 1 and 2 in that equation. Mm-hmm. Tyson kind of being a weird 2A because defensively he changed everything while offensively taking a nap and waiting for Jason Kidd to throw him an awkward lob. And so if you just had Tyson back, and this is the argument that I always hate. They say, well, would we have beat Oklahoma City that year when they got swept in the first round? No, probably not. Mm-hmm. But you've done it the year before. Mm-hmm. And so if you have legitimate wing defenders out on Kevin Durant, Jason Kidd certainly wasn't the same player. Kidd was an aberration. He saw his chance at a ring and used lots of steroids for 3 months or something. But he was as good as he had been at any point as a Maverick in that title run in the minutes that he played. And And so you probably couldn't count on the same type of production for him. But Tyson Chandler is a player that makes Jason Kidd's life easier because when Biggs overcommit on Dirk, Tyson could at least catch the lob. And Jason Kidd, if he can do anything, he can throw a lob. He'll be able to throw a lob at 84 if you can get him to the point of the court and give him an athletic guy to catch it. And so Tyson would have changed that series. It would not have been. They wouldn't have got swept.
Yeah,
at least.
I think
And
this
they wouldn't
is
have
where
been
you're
the 8
going,
seed.
is that the end result would have been the same.
I
don't see them defending the title even with Chandler, and I think that's where you're going.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it would have been different. They probably wouldn't have been the 8 seed. They probably would have had a shot at getting past the first round.
Yeah.
Because they would have had a better or more favorable matchup.
Yeah, but wouldn't you feel better if they re-signed Tyson that year?
No, I'm on board with that.
They lose to the Thunder in the second round.
Yeah.
4-2. You're like, those scrappy Thunder, they finally got over the hump, and we were a little old, but hey, wasn't that a good defense of our title? And we all get to feel good because everybody came back.
And I think Chandler would have made a great argument for bridging the gap to the now 2-year plan.
Yeah.
The problem is, and we talked about role players. Caron Butler, J.J. Barea, and Sean Stevenson are guys that you couldn't have kept under that scenario.
Yeah, but Caron Butler's sort of non-existent because he wasn't.
In the playoffs, he was hurt and he didn't contribute.
All but 30 games into the season, he was hurt. He missed 50 games in the season, the entire playoffs, the entire finals, and they won the NBA Finals.
But when the year after that, he had a good season for
the Clippers.
Clip joint.
Yeah.
So my point is, these are guys that would have been significant role players in that situation, except you couldn't have kept them if you kept Chandler because of Chandler and Kidd's and Terry's contracts.
Well, under the CBA as it stood, you could have kept Chandler and Butler, or you could have kept Chandler and JJ, and you would have been in the tax. But you could have done that. And so this is kind of where I'm getting at. I'm going to run through the rest of the Tyson situation.
Sure. And I cut you off a little bit, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm going to run through the rest of the Tyson situation, and I'm going to kind of make the point that I'm getting at. And in that Chandler and situation, remember that Butler's contract was for 3 years, JJ's contract was for 3 years. So the final year of those deals would be this upcoming year. And Chandler would have 2 years left on his deal. Dirk has 1 year left on his deal, so that significant pay cut is still probably in play if they go through the scenario. So my thing with Chandler is you wouldn't be able to get a max player now if you had Chandler. You wouldn't be able to sign him. Marion's here at big money, Dirk's here at big money, Chandler's here at big money. You have no more cap room. Even letting Jason Kidd go and Terry go, which you would have had to done, and was smart to do. I mean, we saw Jason Terry play this year. We saw Jason Kidd act like he forgot how to play this year. And you can even kind of make the same argument about Chandler. Chandler plays out his next year. If he's at least a serviceable player next year, he is a big trade chip the following year. He's an expiring contract in a league of teams who are trying to avoid the tax like the plague. So if they signed a player they can't afford, or they're just in a situation like Utah's in, like Indiana may be in a year, like Toronto's in, like Golden State is in with a bunch of young players who are going to be coming up for deals soon. If you have teams in situations like that, all of a sudden you have a big salary player that you can move that they know they don't have to pay past the following year, the old expiring contract bit that's in the NBA. So you couldn't have a max player. You could sign a max player even with Tyson in 2014, 2015, or you could trade Tyson and have 2 max players, and so be in the same situation that you could potentially be in under this 2-year plan. And so it wouldn't have killed you, and you could have defended your title if it was going to take you 4 years anyway. Now, what Cuban didn't know at the time was that Howard was going to opt in, and CP3 was going to opt in, and Deron Williams was going to think Joe Johnson was still a good basketball player. And so that kind of tricked him. But as much as it pains me to say, because I think that Mark Cuban is one of the best owners in sports, I think that this was a money-motivated move. And he's done this twice in the franchise's history now. The first time when he amnestied Finley, it was purely a money-motivated move. It was not financial flexibility. They weren't able to sign anybody else. They lost a 15-point-a-game scorer. Now, they got better. They went to the finals, so he wasn't wrong, but it wasn't good, and they haven't had a legitimate two-guard since. But the Mavericks went from second or third in league salary on an annual basis. They're 13th in salary this year. They haven't been in the tax once. If they sign a max player this year, they're not in the tax. If they sign a max player this year and next year with Dirk's salary cut and Marion's restructure and the people coming off the books, they're not in the tax. They will never be a tax team unless they sign two max players, Dirk gets good money, and they then go add because they're opportunistic and see a chance for a title. But they didn't need to do the Chandler deal the way they did it. And you can say it was mistaken or it was bad fortune with Deron Williams. You could say anything you want. But the bare bones of it is this deal saved Mark Cuban a lot of money. And he cashed in on the good feelings of Dallas in winning that title. And I'm not saying he's not even allowed to do that or that's a significantly bad thing. But it's not what he's sold us the last 2 years with. This is going to be a quick rebuild. We're going to be a championship-level team. He said that for 2 years, then backtracked and said it's going to be a 2-year process. And so I do have a problem with what the Mavericks have sold us for 2 years. And they could have gone another way, and it would have cost them a year of financial flexibility.
Would it make a difference if Cuban would have come out and said, financially speaking, it's not in our best interest to go that route. We're going to have to try to conserve some finance before we start the rebuilding process. Would that have made a difference on your opinion? Because to me, it would have, because we've seen what the Cowboys have done, and we've seen their cap situation be annoying every year. That they have 10 guys that got to restructure their contract, and then next year they're $30 million over the cap before the season even starts, before this season even ends.
Yeah, and in the NBA you're not allowed to move money around like that.
So what it seemed like Mark Cuban was trying to do was avoid being in the luxury, but without telling you, hey, I'm going to save some money and then start the rebuilding process. He tried to set it up as, I'm building financial flexibility so we can add that one guy or the two guys. And so it may have been lip service, but at the same time, I'm not overly disappointed with it because of the cap situation. It really does allow us some flexibility, even though last season didn't work out with Howard or CP3 because they took the 1 year clause on their deal. So
yeah, but I'm
not totally disappointed with it. I mean, it's frustrating to not be in the playoffs, but I think Mark Cuban has a winning attitude, and I think he really is trying to get back to that point.
I think that,
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm not even necessarily saying they were lying when they made those statements, because I think it's just a bad thing to charge somebody with is lying. But I do think Cuban and Donnie Nelson thought that it would work out quicker. I think that they thought, well, we got Kidd and Jet and Dirk, and that's good enough for a title defense. We'll win a round in the playoffs. And Jason Kidd got old on him in a hurry. And then they tried to pay him. And Jason Terry kind of regressed back into normal Jason Terry and not super unwilling to talk stuff to LeBron James and then make him seem like he's worse than me at basketball for 2 games, Jason Terry. And Dirk was, kind of fat happy we didn't pay Tyson, so I feel less obligation to work out all summer and more obligation to party in Germany, Dirk. And so he wasn't. It took him 30 games last year to really get jump started. And I don't think that would have been the case had they brought back Tyson. I think if they bring back Tyson, I think Dirk says, let's try to get another one.
So talking about bringing back Tyson and the title defense, let's run down the players.
Yeah.
Real quick. You go through the list, and we'll talk about should they have tried to keep them or made a better effort on these players in defending the title.
Yeah.
You want to start with Chandler?
Yeah, we'll go around the table with Chandler. Chandler got 4 years, $55 million. Keeping in mind that his salary is not completely insane in the last year because you may be able to move it. Is that a deal you would have made in retrospect?
That might be the only one I would have made because, and we talked about this last week with Howard potentially interested in the Mavericks, is that in today's game, it's very, very difficult to find a center that can contribute significantly on one end of the floor, much less two.
Yeah.
And not that Chandler is a big offensive guy because we all know he's not, but he's going to give you a good defensive situation. He's going to get you 10-plus rebounds a game. And he may get you 8 to 10 points a night, and they're probably going to be lob dunks or putbacks or something, but it's enough.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find a guy that's a near double-double guy who can be in the Defensive Player of the Year talks.
Yeah.
So I think Chandler's the one guy I would have at least said for sure you got to make an effort.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence with him too, but I'd kind of lean towards the decision they made and say no. I don't think that you want to make at the time. I guess what we're doing in retrospect, though.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I guess so. I'm not thrilled with it.
I get it.
I'm not thrilled with it. You know, it's Tyson Chandler. We're not talking about
I think you guys
changing guy here.
Well, I mean, he was game changing the year he was here.
Yeah, but
knowing for his career,
knowing the rest of his career from that point to now,
and even before that point.
No, I'm just talking about for the years that we would have had him after that.
Yeah,
I don't know that I'd want to.
Yeah, it is kind of a weird bit with Tyson because he meant so much to the Mavericks. He changed the shape of their defense. He made things work with Dirk Nowitzki in a way that no one's ever done. But we've seen what he is in New York now, and he wasn't worth $13 million this year, and will not. I mean, it's hard to see him being worth $14 million in the future. So, for the 2 years in the future, even for the 1 year, if you kept him and then trade him as an expiring contract. In retrospect, I say no. Yeah, I say no, but. Basically, what you're saying is Tyson Chandler, 1 year with Kid and Terry for $37 million. I mean, that's what you're saying because you're anchored to 3 years of that deal, and he's really giving you a legitimate shot for one out of those 3 years. So it's tough. Mm-hmm. Caron Butler got 3 for I think 19-ish.
I'm out.
He
was a good player. He obviously was hurt during the title run, but a good player. And I liked him. I liked his role that he played on the Mavericks. I just don't know if he was worth that much for that role.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I really liked him when he was playing for those, that short span, but for that money now.
And he had a good couple seasons with the Clippers. So
he's still an effective player even this year with the Clippers, although kind of disappeared in their playoff situation along with the rest of the Clippers this year. I would say you'd almost be able to sell me more on a package deal of Chandler and Butler, even at stupid money. At luxury tax money, because for that 30 games to start that season, they were elite. Mm-hmm. For 30 games, I thought they had a chance to win a title. Oh, yeah. And then when he went down, I thought they had no chance at all. Until Dirk just started saying, I'm making everything, I don't care who's guarding me. Please give me the ball and get away. In the playoffs. It was kind of it was just a weird deal. And another guy who emerged to kind of take the the pain of losing a Caron Butler in that season away. JJ Barea, 3 for 15.
I'm still out on that. I know he did provide a spark off the bench and had some significant offensive contributions, but I don't pay that for a bench player. I know he went to Minnesota and got a lot more minutes, but for his role with the Mavericks, it wasn't worth it. Not even close.
No, I don't think he's worth $5 million a year for being a bench player.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've never been a big JJ believer. I know there's lots of people in this town that think he could have taken the starting point guard role away from Jason Kidd at some point. And so if that's the case, I'm down just because we never see Darren Collison in a Mavericks uniform. And then the last one, Deshaun Stevenson and his tiny contract.
He might actually be worth it because he didn't get a huge contract, and for what he brought to the team, it was actually a pretty significant role. He was the defensive stopper. He kind of played the role that Marion played in the most recent few years, but cheaper contract than that, except he didn't provide near the offense that a Marion does.
Yeah, he just makes a random three.
Yeah, he'll hit a random three, but it's not. It wasn't at the high enough rate that made me think I want to keep that guy.
Yeah, and he was bigger in the Lakers series and the Oklahoma City series than he was in the actual finals when he got sat down for JJ to get more minutes.
Right. So yeah, I mean, the contract's not going to kill you, but I could either or.
Take it or leave it.
Yep.
Nah, hell, keep him. I like three goggles.
Yeah, I actually never understood letting Stevenson go. I almost think that maybe he overplayed his hand with the Mavericks or something. Maybe when he was in discussion with the Mavericks, he was asking for 3-year deals and then got told no and then went out into the rest of the NBA and got a 1-year deal. But I never understood why that didn't work out with him, because he was a usable piece that fit with the pieces the Mavericks had, and Cuban's excuse on him saying it wasn't fair to ask him to take the deal that he took eventually was silly.
Well, we'll see if the Mavericks can get back to the title contention, and we got a 2-year window, I guess, according to Mark Cuban.
See you in 2014, boys.
Yeah. So,
no more Mavs talks, though.
Speaking of title contention, we'll see how the Rangers next month fares for their chances at title contention.
I was scared every time they tried to scare me. Snakes on a plane.
We're back on the Stray and Hammy podcast. Mark, Travis, and Rex with you. The Rangers are seemingly hitting a little bit of a downslope. They've lost 3 games in a row for the first time in the entire season. 3 in the span of 33 hours.
This team is terrible.
Yeah, we should probably just sell them and, maybe bring the Rough Riders up. The trouble is that they're seemingly coming into the toughest month of their schedule. They've got a period in June where they play 20 games, which is the maximum amount of games allowed in the CBA. They play 20 games in a row against some pretty tough opponents. They've got the Red Sox in there, away, Blue Jays away, Indians at home, Blue Jays home. And then this is where it kind of gets tough. You get the Athletics at home, and you go to the Cardinals, and then you get a day off finally, and then you go to the Yankees. And then you play the Reds at home. So you've got some stiff competition in the latter half of the month. And it seems like some flaws are starting to be exposed a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to overshadow the home games either against the Indians, Blue Jays, and Athletics. All 3 of those teams have winning records. All 3 of them play in tough divisions. All 3 of them aren't going to be pushovers.
No.
We've already seen that from the Athletics, that it's a division rival and they're no pushover. But the Indians are leading their division, and they've got a good team this year. The Blue Jays are 3rd in the in the East, and obviously behind the Red Sox and the Yankees, but they're a competitive team to say the least. So
you get them in the
talented
ballpark.
Team,
You get them in the ballpark. They're power bats.
Yeah, Bautista could probably go yard a few times.
Encarnacion. Cool
So-
name.
Keep saying Spanish names.
Did you know Jurickson Profire's middle name is Bartholomew?
That's awesome.
It makes him even more awesome. Just a random nugget.
It's a less Hispanic name, right?
Yeah, Bartholomew.
Is that the Dutch part?
I don't know.
So, yeah, needless to say, their June schedule is not favorable by any means, even their home games. It's going to be a tough stretch, and honestly, I think you might be talking about 500 or one game over. If I don't know how many exact games are in June, but if you can finish the month around 500, you probably would consider it a success given the schedule. I think the other part of it is going to be Perez is coming back healthy now. You got to get him back on track. If he can pitch like he was in spring training, then I think he'll be okay for that starter. I think Grimm and Tepish need to settle back down. I know the rookie start was a little unreal, but then they kind of have not been. They've been rookies the last couple starts, and so it's a little bit stretched. More Grimm than Tepish, but both of them really. And so we really need them, the back half of the rotation, to settle back in, and I think you can at least compete in those games. Kinsler's going to come back, and I think it's going to cause a dilemma on what to do with Profar, only from an aspect that Profar's been good. But at the same time, if you really look at the offense in the lineup, it hasn't been the same with Kinsler gone. Profar's been good, but he hasn't been Kinsler.
Yeah, he's been fine.
Kinsler drives and runs. He has a higher batting average than Profar. He's a veteran hitter. He works counts. And that's Profar's thing, but he hasn't done it at the pro level yet.
No.
So I think you send him back, let him work on it, and you insert Kinsler's bat back in and say, let's spark the offense, get that back on track. And then I think if you have your back half of the rotation guys giving up 4 or 5 runs a game, with Kinsler's offense sparking the whole offense, I think you could compete in some of these games. And then the tough schedule may not be that scary after all.
Yeah, they might be getting some help in the middle of June too. Colby might be back in June, and then Joaquin Soria is due to make his debut in the bullpen. So if he's right, that strengthens a kind of a wavering bullpen at this point.
It's becoming a weakness, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So we're talking about Kinsler and the rotation. Just as sort of a hypothetical, if you could have one back right now, would you have a healthy starting rotation or just pitching rotation, period? Or healthy pitchers, or would you have Kinsler's bat back in the offense?
I think the pitchers are a more noticeable frustration, but if you look at what they've done the last stretch of games, the offense has really been the what's killing them. Because even though the rotations are again noticeably frustrating, you're only seeing 4 or 5 runs per game, and that's something that you can't expect a 1-run game every game. So to see 4 or 5 runs, that keeps you in it, keeps it where you should be competitive. But there's situations like against the Diamondbacks. They had the doubleheader and they lost 5-3 and 5-4. And both of those games, there were situations earlier in the game with runners on the corners, and a situation that if Kinsler had been in the game, you would have at least felt confident that those guys could have moved around. And that could have changed both of those games to wins. So you give up 5 runs, but you still get a win. I think it's you would have gotten the win because of the bat, not because of the pitching. You can live with 5 runs if you get a win. And so I think to me what Kinsler's bat has meant to the offense is more. You miss that more right now because the pitching hasn't been terrible. Just been okay.
Yeah, it just hasn't been as good as it started the season. The pitching started really, really well this season and kind of was the catalyst for what they were able to do. The offense hasn't been overly consistent at any point in this season. Right. It's shown flashes of awesome.
Well, and going back to a segment a couple weeks ago, we talked about the consistency of pitching tends to hold up more over a season than the hitting. The hitting is up and down.
Mm-hmm.
So you need Kinsler to help hold some of that consistency. The pitching, like I said, even though it hasn't been great, it's still not terrible. Mm-hmm. And it's still consistently competitive. So that's why I think Kinsler's bat's more important, and I'd love to see him come back, even though I love Profar.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a tough season to watch as a Rangers fan who's used to seeing the type of offense that will be explosive each and every night. And now we're kind of seeing what other teams have lived with, just being sort of league average all around. And on the topic of whether I have Kinsler or a healthy rotation, I can go either way, really. It'd be great to have Kinsler in there, but I think I would go more with the pitching. I think personally, just Kinsler, he's shown in the past that he will have a hot start, and then he's just as liable to wean or to fade away during the rest of the season. And I think pitching, as you said, is more consistent throughout the year, more stable throughout the year. You have little lulls here, unless you're Derek Holland. You'll be up and down every start, sometimes in the same start. But I think I would take a healthy Colby Lewis and a healthy Matt Harrison over Kinsler's bat, because I think you could get two consistent games instead of Kinsler, who can be up and down. You get 3 hits one night, 1 hit or no hits the next night. I think I just value pitching more. I guess it's just I can go either way on it.
Yeah.
I can see why you would be able to go either way. And by the way, Derek, I love you, and don't let him talk bad about you. It's going to be okay. But I could definitely go either way. I think pitching is just more important in baseball. I think that's the real change in the Rangers is not. It hasn't been anything other than pitching. They've always had a good offense in the ballpark. Even with a less than stellar lineup, they're going to have a decent offense in this park with. If you just build a team for the park. And so I think it's got to be pitching because it gives you a chance to win ball games every night. And if you had a healthy rotation, you're talking about, up to 3 different starters with Ogando, Lewis, and Harrison. And if you're going 5 deep that way with the way Holland's pitching this year and the way that Darvish is pitching this year, you're going to win a lot of baseball games, no matter what your offense looks like. Yeah. As long as if it is league average, you're good because your pitching is way above average.
That's what's kept them afloat this year. Is their above average pitching is helping.
And that's also how you win in the playoffs.
Yeah. So that it could bode well. It just depends on how June shapes up, who they get back, how they perform. I mean, there's a lot of variables here, and that's one of the reasons I like baseball so much. There's so much. There's so much in a season.
So specifically speaking in June, and the fact that there's no Astros and the Angels are playing better and the A's are playing better, if the Rangers mess around this month and at the end of the month they're 2 games back of the A's.
June or end of this month, May?
At the end of June.
In June.
If it happens at the end of May, that's rough.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Things have gone really poorly. But
true.
If it happens at the end of June, and it's something reasonable like that, it's 2 games or a game and a half back of the A's, where's your confidence level that they'll still win the division? Knowing the tough schedule, knowing the amount of games.
I think it depends on the health
knowing
at
the
that
health
point.
situation.
If we're starting to see some guys come back healthy, I think this is the toughest stretch of the season right now. The division games are always a tough part because they mean more towards your standings within the division, but it definitely, if you get through this stretch and you're a game or 2 back, I'm not devastated by it if we're seeing healthy guys come. I mean, we're seeing the team remain healthy and start to become healthy with Soria and Lewis coming back, Perez and Feliz regaining some traction, Kinsler and the bats being healthy, Ogando.
Starting to hear Matt Harrison's name again somewhere.
So if we get to that point, then I think it just depends on the health. If they're healthy, I'm confident. If they're not, then you might as well start looking for next season. I mean, Oakland they're not going to blow you away, but they'll play consistently, and if the Angels start to figure it out, well, that could be a lot of trouble too. So
not by the end of the month though. They're 10 games back. That's a lot of work to do. It'd have to be a bad month and a good month for them.
They won 8 straight.
And we'd have to lose 8 straight though for them to.
Yeah, they won. They won 8 straight, and then they were still 10 games back.
If they won 4 and we lost 4, they would be 1 game back.
They're 10 games back. Yeah, they're 10 games back right now after winning 8 straight. They dug themselves a heck of a hole. I'm not saying they're out of it. I'm just saying they're probably out of it for the next month.
We'll see. I mean, I just think a lot can happen in a month. That's 26 games you're talking, or how many? I can't remember how many they have in the season, but I mean, you're talking about enough games that things can happen where the A's and the Angels could sneak up on you. But like I said, it depends on the health to me. And going back to the Kinsler versus the starting rotation, obviously the starting rotation and the pitching in general has more injury concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Kinsler's one player in the field and in the bats. But
that's probably more fair if it's like Kinsler and Beltre. Mm-hmm. God forbid, by the way.
Well, Beltre is healthy, so
dude will play with like one leg, half a nut.
But the to that point, I mean, if that's the case, then yeah, absolutely, you want your pitchers to be better in that stretch because that's what's going to carry you over a longer period of time. But getting Kinsler back will spark the difference. The Rangers are batting. Their batting average is 4th in the league right now, but their runs and RBIs are 10th. So somebody's not driving. They're not pushing the runs across. They're not hitting with runners in scoring position. So that's a pretty significant point to me. But again, you can either one is a significant tribute. Pitching is significant in today's game, and so you can see both going that way. But if the pitching holds up even remotely, then I don't think we're talking about them being behind the A's or the Angels closing on them.
Even with the tough month.
Yeah, I think, they've already swept the Red Sox. They've already shown that they can play against the A's. I mean, those are the teams that they play. Kansas City's not going to pose a threat. The other teams are good, but I don't think it's anything to be overly scared of, even with health issues.
And do you think that they can continue to play the way that they're playing in the tough stretch? Like a lot of people are talking about, okay, this is a tough month. This could go really, really poorly. At the same time, they haven't lost a lot of series.
No, yeah.
They just lost 3 games in a row for the first time, and it was on a doubleheader.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even a regular, 3-game stretch situation. So, if they mow through this month, on secondary pitching and like they've done the rest of the season, you've almost got to be sky high about this team.
Definitely, yeah. That's one thing I don't want to lose in all this conversation about them potentially doing bad is that they're not doing so bad right now. They're getting by with they're not their top players. So if they're able to continue what they're doing, get some guys back healthy, we could be looking at something special still. I mean, there's a tough month isn't something to be scared of right now if you're a Rangers fan.
Well, and think about this. They lost 3 straight for the first time all season, and they're still best record in the majors, or half a game back from the best record in the majors. So they were in a good position before. They put themselves in a good position. I think it'll hold up for the most part for the month of June, even with the tough schedule, because they've set themselves in this position. Now, if they go into the end of the season like last year and forget to play the last 2 weeks, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. But, I think this team's different.
Yeah, I don't think Pierzynski, and I don't think Berkman and the guys who were there for that last year, I don't think they'll allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Well, and just the fact that they're back doing more what they're good at, and it's not all reliant on, let's hit 2 home runs tonight and we'll win. I think they've got a better chance to not just fall asleep because, sometimes you're not going to get 2 home runs in a game, but you've got enough guys that can manufacture runs now that you're not going to lose every 2-0 game at the end of the season with the way they're playing now.
Yep. All right, well, it'll be an interesting month to watch for sure. Thanks for joining us on the Strain Hammy podcast. Follow us on Twitter @StrainHammy and be sure to check out the site www.strainhammy.com. Thanks for listening.
Spaghetti's my favorite meal
Texas
ever.
toast. I like the. You know what I'm saying?
I like when you start with the noodle and then you meet in the middle with a kiss.